Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today we're speaking with the cinematographer. His credit list is long and includes Driving Miss Daisy, Black Robe, Alive, and Meet the Parents. We're pleased to welcome Peter James. Peter, thank you for doing this.
Hey, Peter.
Thanks very much for having me. It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
We'd like to start with our normal question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Is this something you always thought you wanted to do, or did you go down another path? What's your story?
Yeah, what drew you to cinematography?
Well, as a kid at school, I'm dyslexic, and dyslexia hadn't been invented at that stage. So that was
You invented it.
That was a bit of a problem. And one of the school teachers, John Mitchell, he was a Morris brother Gabriel, and he used to do TV shows for kids, and that was a great interest to me. I used to get him off the subject in English and have him tell us about the studio, and it worked really well. And I thought, well, that was good, but being a dyslexic, I was in the slow class with other kids, and a cousin of ours came to dinner one night, John Cleary. He was an author. He wrote over 50 books. And he just had a film made called The Sundowners. And he said, oh, what does Peter do? And he said, well, he's always taking photographs with his box brownie and climbing up on chairs to take pictures and things like this. So he got me an interview with a studio in the Christmas holidays. And they put me on, and I stayed there for 5 years. I absolutely loved it. And it was heaven at first sight. It was just perfect for me. It was a perfect fit for it. That's the luckiest thing that ever happened in my life, quite frankly. And at the end of the time, before I was supposed to go back to school, Mum was tucking me into bed and said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to win the Oscar for cinematography. And I haven't done that, and I'm still trying to do that. But it's been a lifelong quest, and fantastic, yeah.
When you said studio, what was the studio then that you were working in for 5 years?
Oh, it was just a small studio. It just did local production, TV commercials, had its own laboratory and sound editing rooms. And that's where I met Russell Boyd. He came and worked at the studio. And David Gribble and other cinematographers. We're all still lifelong friends.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. We had to do everything. You had to do projection and help build the sets and paint them and things like that, and build the studio if there was nothing on. Carry bricks and mix cement. We did everything. I love going in the metal shop and turning metal. That was great fun. It was really, really great way to learn. There were no film schools in those days, so you had to learn on the job, and there were incredibly generous men who taught me how to do things. I'd also get a bit of a smack if I went out of focus and things like that. It was very tough. You couldn't do that today. You end up in jail.
Yeah.
And where did you grow up?
In Sydney, a very relaxed, simple life, and swimming, going to the beach and all that sort of stuff. Like, we didn't know anything about cinematography. The family didn't know anything about it. So there was no history of... my father was a house painter, so he was good with colour. And I learned a lot of things about colour from him. But we just weren't in the arts at all,
Was there a lot of film production in Sydney at that time?
No, hardly any. It was very small, mostly newsreels, and TV wasn't really just starting to get going. So there was a little bit of documentary work. the odd feature film, not very many. I was at the start of the new renaissance of film, which this is like the late 60s, you know. It was pretty basic, you know, big Mitchell cameras and things like that, and the early Arri cameras, the motor underneath, which made it almost impossible to do anything with, you know. And eventually, because I was so keen on focus pulling and things like that, I helped design a sliding base plate for Arri and the 6.6 matte box, where we took a Samuelson's matte box and changed it around, and next thing, Heinz Fieldhouse went back to Munich, and ended up the production matte box and the sliding base plate came out.
Wow, I didn't know that one.
Well, after the box Brownie, I just got a Pentax and then had a 8mm camera, and just loved making movies. And I also would like the musical reviews for a stage show that the youth group used to put on. And it was pretty basic, but big old faders and racks and things like this. But I love doing the lighting, and I think that's where my interest in lighting came about. I remember the day when I got what the inverse square law was of light, and it was like a thunderbolt. You know, it just sort of hit me in the back of the head, and I thought, oh gosh, this is incredible how the light falls off and all this sort of stuff. And everybody was laughing, the fact that I was so fascinated by this. It just you weren't taught things as by osmosis. You just picked it up as you went along.
Yeah.
I thought, why are they using 5Ks and why are they using Inky Dinkies? And then I realised what they were doing it for, and that changed my life. It was great.
What was your first break on a movie? I mean, I believe you operated the Cars That Ate Paris, right?
Yeah,
that Peter Weir directed.
Yeah, with Johnny McClane shot it, and I think I was the third operator to come on to that show, and it was anamorphic, and they flew me in a plane. I was sort of throwing up behind the camera truck, so nervous, and it was a night shoot where the armadillo is a VW has got spikes all over it, and it goes careering and impales somebody on the front of it, and so that was my first shot, a stunt like that. And I was just
wow.
I didn't eat for 2 days. I was just sick, you know.
Had you operated before that,
No.
or were you always somebody that went through the different grades?
Yeah, no, I that was my first film job as an operator. Yeah. No, I'd shot some earlier films where I did a short film way back called Willy Willy in 1969, and in 1970 I won the Millie Award, which is the top cinematography award for that film, and it was like a half-hour film, and we shot on short ends. We'd load 60 feet of film, and if it wasn't any good, I had a garbage bin next to the camera. I'd take the side off the magazine and throw the film in the garbage bin, save on the processing.
Right, till you got the shot you liked.
Until we got the shot we liked, and then we'd keep that. And but it's saved on processing by throwing it out before it was no good. But we used to rehearse a lot because we did not have any film. It was just a long load was 120 feet. You know, it was pretty hopeless. But I won the top award, and I was using things like my mother's hairnet, which was when she put her hair in rollers. She was a hairdresser, and she used a pink chiffon scarf. And anyway, I asked her if I could have the scarf and cut it up and put it on the back of the lenses, and
put it on the back of the lenses.
Yeah, and it looked.
Where did you get that trick from? Did you read that in American Cinematographer magazine or something? Where did you get that from?
Definitely wasn't in American Cinematographer magazine.
Not pink one.
No, and it was pink, which is the wrong color. It should be white. It shouldn't be.
Yeah, right.
It was lovely,
or black, but pink.
Lovely on cosmetic commercials, like hair commercials, and things like
I
that.
bet,
But
yeah.
mostly we were shooting in black and white, so the coloured pink didn't matter. But
Oh.
when you get into the colour film, of course, I worked with a lovely Canadian cinematographer, Fritz Spies, and Fritz was very German and very formal. And when I produced this pink net, he just about had a heart attack. He thought this was the worst thing you could possibly do. And I said, I always put it on the diagonal, Fritz, not... so sticking these things to backer lenses was... anyway, that got me a lot of... That net got me a lot of awards, I tell you. It was something completely different in those days. And like I was only... I was 22 when I won the top award in the country. So it was pretty great start to my career. And then I won it again a few years later, and on a film called Caddy. I'd been working with a director on documentaries, and we did a film called Who Killed Jenny Langby with Don Crombie. And Tony Buckley was producer on a lot of these things. And Tony really liked my work and what I was doing. And I did Willy Willy with Tony. He edited it. So he got me to shoot this film, Caddy. And I'd been down in Melbourne doing documentaries I'd watched Jeffrey Unsworth lighting on Don Quixote. And I did a documentary about it, the making of. And I sent the camera gear back to Sydney and stayed and lay on a plank in the rafters and watched Jeffrey working, and that was my film school basically. Watching him put two brute arcs up in the corner of the studio and backlight Uraev and asked the gaffer to cut so there's only one shadow. There's not double shadows. And we said, well, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But it was the idea was the big idea of having a single source of light. You needed two lights to cover the area, and only us would notice the double shadow for a moment as he spun past it.
All right.
Electricians were hanging out there on scaffolding trying to put these big flags up to make a single shadow. They did pretty well, but that concept of the big idea stayed with me, so that even when I was doing documentaries, I might only have 4 lights, but I might put them all together and put them through a silk or something like that, or bounce them off a wall. And I kept it very simple and naturalistic, like Unsworth did. So I was basically copying Jeffrey in when I did the film Caddy. I hadn't developed the style at that stage, and that comes later with more experience. And the film did very well, and I realized that the script needed to be broken down into seasons. So I took the idea to the director, Don Crombie, who I'd done Jenny Langby with, and he said, "Oh, that's a good idea, let's do that." So we got together. That's where we had our first turn the page with the director experience, which I firmly recommend everybody does. Every cinematographer should do this. And what we do is we go with the director and production designer and sometimes costume and the first assistant, and the director turns the pages and he talks about or she talks about what they want from the film at that point. We would bring references of things that we liked. I remember the production designer Owen Williams coming with a packet of hundreds and thousands sprinkles, those things that kids put on kids' cakes and things like that. He said, I want this dance sequence to look like that. And so the wardrobe department said, "Oh yeah, that's cool. I'll get those colours," and I use coloured lighting to complement the colour of the sprinkles, and so we all got on the same page, which was fantastic. And we did well with Bruce Beresford. We do that every film, and it's the most creative time you ever have on a film. It's like where the big dream happens.
Yeah.
And you've got to allow yourself to have that big dream. Otherwise, you're just doing shot by shot. You've got to look at the overall film and break it down and have that big vision for it. That's so important. I can't stress that enough. And sometimes you think, oh, the budget, we don't have enough money to do this, but there's always a way. You can, if you've got the idea, the great dream, you'll find a way to realize it.
So how did you tie up with Bruce Beresford?
Oh,
because you've had a long relationship together. How did you start out and meet him?
Oh, yeah, we've had an unbelievably long relationship, like 14 years or something like that. It's like 14 films.
Yeah.
Like it's a bit of a record, I think. Well, we met in a battery chicken shed in the outskirts of Sydney doing a bank commercial. And he'd seen my he'd seen my films, and we did this commercial, which was nothing special. And then he kept on asking me to do other films of his that were coming up, and we nearly did Double Jeopardy, Total Recall. That fell through with Dido De Laurentiis was going to do it and built the studios on the Gold Coast, and but his company went broke and we didn't do it. But then he asked me to do Miss Daisy. Dick Zanuck thought it should have been a set and all that sort of stuff, but they couldn't afford to build a set and they'd cut the budget in half. And Bruce said, "Oh, I'll get an Australian camera and he'll be able to photograph it on location. That won't matter, you know." So they got me along, and Dick was a wonderful man. He was such an encouraging producer. He just had a wonderful attitude. So I did it all on location in Atlanta, using HMIs inside. You know, it was just a nightmare to rig, but it looked beautiful. It very. Again, I used the pink chiffon net on the back of the lens for Miss Daisy.
Oh wow!
And that's when I thought, well, how are we going to? This film takes place over so many years, like it's about 14 years.
Yeah.
And I thought, we can't change the look of the film every time she gets a new Cadillac. You know, it's got to be some other thing, that not just time. And I thought, well, photography is emotion. And really, we only change the photography when the emotion of the film changes. So I broke the script down and then drew a line where the emotion changed, like when Idella, the maid, dies in the kitchen shelling the peas. The black chiffon goes away and the smoke goes out of the house. So there's no more atmosphere in the house. So you've lost the life of this lovely lady in the house. And then when Morgan Freeman Hope drives her to the Martin Luther King dinner, we go from white promise to black promise, and then later on, when she's old and she's in the nursing home, we take all the diffusion off, and it's just plain. The camera's just naked. The light's harder. It's not as soft. And because we had Jessica, when we were working with her, she was 80 years old, and we had to make her look 14 years younger. So all the diffusion and nets and smoke all helped to create this appearance of her being, and the wigs. We had 27 wigs in the film, which is a lot for only 3 characters, really. There was Morgan, Jessica, and Booley, and Patti LuPone as well. So I in my breakdown, I'd have the years on the across the page, and then the changes of the mood when they would happen. There'd be a double red line across the page, and then I'd also have a column for wigs, which wig we had in at the time, because Morgan went to white wigs, which meant I couldn't bounce any light off the roof or anything like that, because it would just light up his hair. So I had all that broken down, and this becomes like the Bible. And then you have a column for. I just get a breakdown from the first assistant director of the film in chronological order, and then on the other page I put camera grip electrics and then special effects usually. In that case, I had makeup, I had wigs. And then as I scout, I fill in what I think I'll need to do. And then as I shoot, I either fill it in or one of the assistants fills in what lenses we used, what stop we did, whether we did tracking shots or whether we had what the color palette was on the lighting. So at the end of the film, you've got the whole look of the film in a book. And if you're shooting out of schedule, which you mostly are, out of order, you can see what fits in. You got I had a crane shot there. It was on a long lens, or it was very blue lighting, and now I'm going to go with very orange lighting or something like that. So you know what you're doing, and that really is helpful for me to keep track of a film, because having come from commercials where you kept the whole commercial in your head, that was easy to keep 60 seconds or 30 seconds or a minute in your head. But when you try to keep 2 hours in your head, it's very complex, and you're taking the audience on a very long journey. So you've got to have that journey mapped out visually in your breakdown. I still do that today. That's every film I break down. Bring my references. Of course, now we've got things like Shot Deck and so on. But before I would come with magazine cuttings, because doing commercials, we would just tear up Vogue magazines or whatever and have all these beautiful photographs and references. And also, I have a good library of photographic books, and we have some of them have got Post-it notes all the way through them, because they've got such great portrait references, which are so important, because 80% of a film is in close-up. So portrait lighting really dictates how you're going to do the master. Gone are the days when the close-ups did not look anything like the master. They're all out of focus. But
that's true. Yeah.
It was quite different.
Have you ever come across a director that was resistant to planning ahead of time and wanted to be spontaneous on the day? Have you ever because everybody has different ways, and have you ever encountered a director that wanted to do it in a less planned out way?
Yes, there's probably most of the other directors I've worked with didn't. Were not as interested in the overall plan, which I find rather flabbergasting, really, because to me that I thought they would have thought it was the best way to go about making a film. Some of them were just inexperienced and didn't know better. Others were just nervous and didn't want to be pinned down. They didn't want to leave a record of what they were going to do. They were mostly American directors were like that. They were very nervous about leaving a trail. But which made it harder for the designer and the wardrobe people. They would show them things and they say, "Oh yes, that's nice," or whatever, or "I don't like that." But it wasn't done ahead of time. They tend to accept whatever people come up with. But I think to sit with the director and talk about it and to really get what they want in their head out. And the first assistant being there would ask, how many extras do you want for that scene? And there's always a budgetary restraint on extras and different things like that. And we wouldn't let the producer come to those meetings either, because the producer would muck it up. They would only talk about budget. They wouldn't talk, this is a talk about look. It's about how the film's going to look. And that's what we're responsible for. And the budget can come later, but we'll find a way to do that later on. And of course, the first assistant's looking after the budget in a sort of an undercover way. But they've also got the interest of the director at heart too.
Yeah. And it is a misconception to think that if you work it out ahead of time that you're restricted, because in actuality, you just know the script better because you've worked it all out. And therefore, if you get on the set and see something incredible, you know how it could fit into the film because you know the film so well, because you've done so much work ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And being dyslexic, I sort of remember the script. I read it. It takes me 3 days to read a script. It's agony. I've got to get up early in the morning and turn on the lights and make pots of tea and have a hard chair at the dining room table and lots of light and start reading. And otherwise, I can't concentrate. And then I always have a notepad next to me and make any notes that I might want to talk to the director about, or there's some dialogue that worries me. And I always use a 4-color pen to mark it up, So the first reading is very important. It's the most luxurious reading you'll ever have of a script. That's where all the juices will flow, all the creativity and the ideas will happen. That on subsequent readings, you won't have those thoughts. And that's where it's very formulative. So even if I read a script just to see if I want to make the film, I've turned down hundreds of scripts, but I read them as if I'm going to make the film. I sit down and put all my energy into reading it. And I don't skim read. I'm a very, very painfully slow reader. That's why it takes me sometimes, well, mind you, Daisy, I think I read it in 2 mornings, and made virtually no notes whatsoever. Pretty well perfect. And there's only been a couple of scripts like that you get through and they're in top shape. They're very well written, very well thought through. All the dialogue is plausible and accurate. And particularly if it's a period film, the dialogue's not accurate. It's not of the period. It's contemporary. And I make the film while I'm reading it. So I'm exhausted at the end of reading a script. It's like I've done a month's work. It's like it's really hard. But that's where you have the dream.
That brings us straight to Black Robe. What did you feel when you read that? Then that must have been really exhausting.
Oh my God, Black Robe was. I thought, how the hell are we going to shoot this thing? It's really difficult film. Like nobody's seen Black Robe, but it is a beautiful film, and it's probably still my best. It's my best work, I think. And
it's a stunning film, Peter. It's a stunning film, and it's so great because it's it feels like one of the most authentic films of that period in history.
Yeah, well, it was. I know. We did a pilot for Ridley Scott, and Ridley said, "I've got a copy of Black Robe, and I'll watch it every year just to prove to myself see how good films can be." Which was a lovely compliment of him to say that. And that was done on a very restricted budget up in northern Quebec. It was the first and only co-production between Australia and Canada. I bought my camera crew and a grip with me because I couldn't find a grip in Quebec. They were all crazy. They had a fantastic gaffer, but the grips were a nightmare, and my back went out in sympathy. I was so stressed out. I thought I got to get David over to help me here, and he did a fantastic job in unbelievably difficult conditions. And again, you take the script and break it down, and it's seasonal again. It starts in the autumn and goes through into the depths of winter, and it's a long journey of the priest being taken back to, and the French boy being taken back up to the winter hunting grounds above the waterfalls, where there's no hope of anybody ever seeing them again until next spring. And we wanted to get this feeling of wilderness and distance. And it's the only film I've shot basically in chronological order, because we didn't know what the seasons would do and when the snow would come and stay. And we had the actors paddling canoes, and children and dogs, and like everything that could go wrong we had. And like it was just a nightmare. And I rigged up a camera barge, a pontoon, and then put a dolly track at water level and had a gallows arrangement to hang the camera on. And I realized we could adjust the speed of the dolly to, if the actors didn't hit their mark or couldn't get to us fast enough, we could dolly backwards. Because everything's moving, there was no reference to the back in the foreground, because the water's always moving. And so you could cheat like crazy and dolly to an actor, and it looked like they paddled to you. That was really helpful, because they weren't the best paddlers; they were actors, not paddlers. And there had to be people sitting in a canoe; their bums are below water, So you had to be just off the water level. So that's why we had a gallows arrangement to get the camera just off the dolly track. So it was only about a foot above the water.
Mm-hmm.
And had another camera at the front of the pontoon on a high hat that I operated, and got the most beautiful atmospheric shots of the sky, and the weather would change during the take. You know, that's what's so brilliant about that. And Andre Fleurin was my second unit guy, and he did these beautiful high shots, which we had to get a helicopter to get him up there. But I didn't want to use a helicopter to do the shot because it would have been, look at me, I'm a helicopter. I wanted just a static shot, and to see these little tiny canoes paddling along in this vast landscape, and you go, oh my God, where are they going now, you know? And Andre shot sequences with second unit, just people paddling doubles, that we eventually just shot a few close-ups and cut them into the film, which were really atmospheric and spectacular. So that was great. But that's the coldest film I've ever done, I must say. It was absolutely freezing, and the actors were amazing. The production design, Herbert Pinter's sets were fantastic. I said to Bruce, we're on location. Everything was shot on location. And they get to the Iroquois village, and they get beaten up in a gauntlet, and then they go into the longhouse. I said, Bruce, why don't we do a shot where we start outside the longhouse and then dolly with them and take the side off the set so we can see them go in, and it gives the audience a chance to know that we are actually on location, and it's not. Well, we did it once, and then Bruce loved that idea. So we did it. We did it several times throughout the film with huge iris changes and all this sort of stuff, which were very tricky things to do, and make look not like I Love Lucy, where you've got a set with a wall that provides things, but they were very organic. So we pulled it off, which is great. It's a wonderful one where there's old priestess dying and the other priest is outside. We dolly outside, and there's the other priest is digging a grave, sort of in the snow.
Yeah.
Was there ever any talk about doing some of it on stage or building sets?
Never. They didn't have the budget to do it.
Right.
Like in the end, we were shooting, when we got to the Huron village at the end of the film, we first arrived there, and I said to Herbert, the cross is in the wrong spot. It needs to move, 15 feet to the left. It's too close to the church. He said, oh, my God, look at, he said, this cross 20 foot high, and it's a tree, and it's frozen into the ground. I said, well, you've got to move it, because it doesn't compose. Well, he was furious with me, absolutely furious with me. He said, it's going to take a day to move this fucking cross. And so they dug it out with a pick, and then dug another hole with a pick, and about 8 men picked it up and moved it and put it in the other hole and chucked a few rocks and buckets of water in, and the water froze immediately. It was so cold. So it was like cemented into place by we had to pick the ice off it to get it out. It was just painful. But in the end, the shots where the cross is now is perfectly composed. It's just there's some sublime shots of the priest and the cross and the church. And I remember that the day which we had to do the end scene of the film, the priest is baptizing everybody in the church, and the camera comes outside and does a crane up, and there's the cross again, and it's snowing. I'm making snow with potato flake, and I got smoke machines. I never used so much smoke in my life as I did on that film. Every scene had smoke machines running in the background during vast valleys of mist and haze, and the depth of foreground snow, and then smoke in the background to give it the depth of atmosphere. I had kept on. I don't know whether it was being with the Indians or what it was, but we're always having these very vivid dreams. The whole crew were having these incredibly vivid dreams. I had this dream of the end scene, like weeks before we did it. I went to Billy Two Rivers, who was our technical advisor on the Indian side of things, and He was a wonderful, wonderful man. He's in it. He wouldn't leave us, the set. He was in it. He's in it about 3 times as different characters in the film. He loved being on the film. And I said, Billy, we want the sunset for the end scene of the film. I said, I've been praying to the Holy Spirit for a beautiful sunset, because we didn't have any sun from the time the priest paddles off with the Indians. That's the last bit of sun you see in the film until the very last shot of the film. And I didn't want any sun at all. In fact, we had weather cover for sun in one set, which is inside a teepee. I don't know what inside a teepee should look like at night, but I lit it and it worked. And that was our wet weather. That was our sun weather cover for the film. One day, and fortunately, we didn't have any sun. So I said to Billy, can you have a chat to your guy and see if we can get some sun for this last shot? Anyway, the day comes and I said, Billy, today we need the sun this afternoon for this shot. And I worked out from a compass where the sun was going to be. So after lunch, we came to the sun in the morning. The cloud was down to the top of the church. It was just a terrible day, Anyway, after lunch, I could see this little break on the horizon. I said to Bruce, we're going to get the sun. We've got to do this shot. He said, okay. So we're inside the church. I've got a small crane and a remote iris change on a cable device. It was pretty primitive. And we start with the priest baptizing the people in the church. And then the camera moves outside and we do this iris change from, I think it was from 4:5 to 16, pretend D filters in to get it to so it was a stop on the lens. The lens just stopped at 16. And the focus puller handed me the remote and said, would you mind pulling the iris? So I did the iris change. The camera cranes up and there's the sun, just a weak sun coming under the cloud right behind the centre of the cross, and the potato flakes falling down around, and some Indians come into the church and the others walk away. And that was the end shot of the film for the roll-up. And I think we did like 3 takes or something like that. Then the sun went. And it was a very dodgy shot to do. It was really, really ballsy to pull that off. And I turned to Billy at the end and I said, thanks very much, Billy. And he said, I think we're talking to the same fella. So that's probably the highlight of my career, really. That's one of the sweetest things that ever happened on a film set. That serendipity that comes together to tell the story is extremely moving. It's enough to restore your faith in whatever you believe in, really. It's quite spectacular.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, on a film like Black Robe, then how do you approach it in terms of equipment? And I mean, I know in some big Hollywood films, they have like 2 50-foot Technocranes. They have a whole lot just sitting there waiting for any time they might use them. But presumably on something like Black Robe, even though Driving Miss Daisy was so successful, I'm sure it gave Bruce a little bit of a budget, but it can't have been a huge amount of money. So how did you work out the equipment that you would need, both the camera equipment and the lighting equipment?
Well, you had to be very careful. Like, we didn't have any gear sitting around. Like, everything we had, we used.
Right.
There were no big cranes. It's just that was just a small jib arm. That was with a camera, no remote heads. Just Danny, the operator, operated the shot. It's very basic stuff. The biggest expense was a wind machine, I think, and the smoke machines. But I had fantastic special effects people. They were sensational, the people who did it. It was a very low budget. I don't know, you just persevere, really. You break it down and make sense of it. And the people, there was no big studio involved, so there was nobody harassing us. But I did have enormous amount of help from Panavision. I remember Larry Hazelwood, who was used to look after me at Woodland Hills, and he came to set one day and walked over the hill in a suit, and they'd lost his baggage, and he just had leather shoes on and an overcoat. And I said, "Oh, Larry, stand on this pancake because you're going to freeze to death here. This is crazy." Got wardrobe to get him a jacket and stuff. He just wanted to see what I was doing and on location. And but they were really helpful. They've been really helpful in my whole career, as have been Ari. Ari, when I won my first award at 22, they gave part of the prize was an air ticket to Munich and to be a guest at Ari, which was absolutely life changing. That was my film school. It was they were very, very generous, and they still are today. Like, they're a wonderful company to deal with, and fantastic people. Yeah, so very, very helpful and encouraging.
When you were saying earlier that you watched Jeffrey Unsworth light, and you had kind of been inspired by his lighting, but later you developed your own style. Can you talk about that? How do you feel that your styles developed over the years?
Yeah, I was imitating Jeffrey, and I did a lot of sort of period films too, that worked into that sort of classic style of doing something, like a film called The Right-Hand Man I shot for Di Drew with Rupert Everett in it. It was like a Gothic movie, and Victorian Gothic movie, and it was absolutely beautiful looking film. Didn't do it any business, but it was fantastic. But then I found myself a film called The Irishman, another film for Donald Crombie and Tony Buckley. I wanted it to look like a painting of Ray Crooks, he's an Australian artist. I use a lot of artists as a reference for my work. His interiors were all like 3 stops underexposed, and the exteriors are always the correct exposure. So I did this for the entire film, and it meant I had to have light coming through, big lights coming through windows. We had one brood arc and a lot of mini broods. They were pretty hopeless, but, that's all we had. And I made up some bounce sheets of calico on frames that we could fold up into a book on wooden frames and put them in the truck, and then they'd fold them out to they were about 12 foot square, and we could prop them up. Everybody had big hats on. It was in North Queensland, so their faces have all got dark makeup on, and they got big hats on. I thought, this is impossible. How am I going to light this? And I was shooting on Agfa film because I wanted the texture of Agfa. Because when you shoot on film, it's like having a canvas. The film is like a canvas, and you could change your canvas for whatever look you were trying to create. We can't do that today. We're stuck with the same digital chip. So it's a bit more pressure on us today to not only do we have all our filters and lenses and diffusions and things like that, but we've got fortunately we've got much more post control in the grading, which is the color timer can do a much more interesting job than we could ever do in film. But that's how you got to sort of try and get your look back. But The Irishman, I ended up lighting through, and I found often I had my lights at 180 degrees to one another. There'd be a key light coming from one direction, and then there'd be another light coming from the other direction. And that was it, no other lights. And I thought, well, this is also a very good way to do black and white. Because in the old days of black and white, they did a lot of that. There was always a liner and a key. So it ended up, I often step back and look at the lighting setup and say, I don't plan to do it that way, but it ends up being that way. And maybe I went for that sort of, in those places where you can get lights around and in bigger sets, I ended up lighting in that style. But that every film sort of looks a bit different because every script is different. So it's no good having the same look in every film. Like some cameramen will just put a big spot, like a Leica down onto a piece of paper onto a tabletop, and that'll be the light for the film. And they do that in every film. You know whose work it is by the way it's lit.
Mm-hmm. I think most of us will know who he's talking about, but yeah, carry on.
and it's got nothing to do with the story. It's got nothing to do with how the film is trying to communicate. It's every you should better watch a film without the sound and look at the pictures, and it should tell you the story. The images should tell you the story. And that's why I'm so keen to look at locations and things even before they're locked off, before the art department locks them off. And Bruce knows this now, and he says, oh, look, you better get him in to have a look at these locations. If he doesn't like them, it's going to be hell to play later on. Like, he's going to be unhappy. And it happens on a lot of, like, I've been on films where they've locked off the locations and we get there and we can't possibly film them. I said, look, we can't get on this. We can't get on this roof. It's a slate roof. It's an antebellum house. We'll wreck it. We'll wreck this house. We have to find another house. You know, it's crazy. Also, finding the locations on Black Robe and Alive, which were films in Canada in the wilderness, and Alive was very difficult up on a mountain. Norman Reynolds, the production designer, was a fantastic English designer.
Oh, Norman, yeah.
He's just a lovely man, and he took us around and showed us all the locations. And we got back at the end of the morning flying. Everybody was like over it because we'd flown so much in helicopters in the mountains. It's very tricky and dangerous. And I said, Norman, we don't have the location. I'm sorry, I don't think this is going to work, you know. He said, oh, but I can dress it with snow. I said, it's going to go over this film. You'll be dressing, every night you'll be dressing the set for snow. It'll be a hell for you to do it. I said, could you get the maps and let us know where we flew today? So Robert Mountseer, the mountaineer, came in and we sat down and we worked out the maps. And I said, have we flown? And if you look at Alpine maps, they're very complex. And I said, what's that there? He said, that's a glacier. And I said, what's that over there? He said, that's a hanging glacier. And they're all drawn differently to what we're used to in normal topographical maps. So I said, well, have we looked there, down there? And he said, no. We were at 5,000 feet when we went over there. I said, oh, we need to go back and look there. So Norman and I went back in the chopper. And before we couldn't set down because nobody had ever landed on this glacier. So the guy had to pack the snow down and all this sort of stuff, and we couldn't go in. And Norman's going crazy, saying, this is it, you know. And we had to wait for the rotor blades to stop in case the helicopter fell over and things like that. And we jumped out in the snow, did a belly flop into the snow so we didn't go down a crevasse or anything like that. And he said, this is it, the plane's going to come over here and we'll do this. And I said, oh, I'll put the base camp over there. And so we ended up doing it all on a glacier, which was absolutely perfect for the film. It was perfect for the film. And also the locations are a character in the film. And people don't consider a location to be a character, or a house or a room. Somebody's bedroom is very much like good set dressers and people like that save your life. You're only as good as what you photograph, you know. For the cinematographer to make the location or a room or a house a character, like that's what I was trying to do in Miss Daisy, so that when Adela dies, the soul goes out of the house and things like that. And you can do that with lensing too, like on Paradise Road was Bruce's first anamorphic film. I said, Bruce, let's shoot all the women in this concentration camp in the jungle on a 300 and a 600 mil anamorphic lens, and the Japanese prison guards on a 40 and a 50 mil lens. And that way we got the solidarity of all these women all packed up on the long lens. It made them look like a collective group, and it produced an enormous amount of sympathy. And the Japanese guards had these palm trees, which were like prison bars behind them, and they were like the prisoners. They were in this solo, lonely existence, which it was a wonderful contrast and told the story beautifully. And the same in The Irishman, with that landscape, always having the landscape at the correct exposure. It made the background, like most English cameramen come to Australia and they overexpose the background 7 stops. It just blows out. But we had windmills and cattle yards and horse yards and things like that in the background. And at the end of the film, I didn't realize I'd done this, but at the end of the film, when we ran it for the first check print of the grading, I sort of burst into tears because it was a very patriotic film. The background of the countryside of Australia had become a character in the film. And Johnny Seal was my camera operator on my first 2 films, so I was completely spoiled by having him as my camera operator.
Wow.
My God,
Wow.
what a fabulous camera operator he was. And that led me to get on with the lighting, And we'd worked out where the horizons were going to go, and he said, let's to keep the horizons the same, so that when we're in the jungle, the horizon just fills up with frame, but in the outback, it's just all sky. So we did that. So there's all those little touches that you bring to a film to make it the landscape part of to be a character in the film, to be consistent and to tell the story.
Was there? I was interested on Paradise Road. It's interesting to do a film set in a Japanese prisoner of war camp, but actually with major Hollywood actresses.
I know, they're all big names.
Was there a conflict between the two? Was there a conflict between the subject matter and the fact that you're dealing with Glenn Close and Fran McDormand?
Yeah. Well, they didn't have trailers. There was a very no frills sort of production, and they all knew this going in, and they were absolutely fabulous. What professional women they are! Like, my goodness, both of them, all of the women on that film were like it was
Kate Blanchett.
Kate Blanchett. Well done, yeah. Well, yeah, and yes, having all those Hollywood actresses in the jungle, basically, and in paddy fields in Thailand, like Glenn just wades in there, and Kate Blanchett and all those, they just get in there and do it. I thought, God, what could they could catch anything from this stuff, and in the ocean, had them in the oceans. After the ship sinks, and they all jump overboard. All the actresses jumped. Glenn Close, everybody jumped overboard. Frances McDormand, they all just jumped off the ship into the Great Barrier Reef. It was fantastic. We had shark patrols, of course, to watch out for them, and there was a huge current that just made them drift miles. We had to go and round them all up, and bring them back after when you said cut. It was crazy.
Must be great to work on a film where everybody's so engaged. It's not always like that, is it?
No, well, it's not, unfortunately. And some films are quite unhappy when they're all not engaged in the production. But I must say, another reason why I like working with Bruce, because the actors love Bruce, and he's very unpretentious, and he'll be there all day long, standing on set with his binoculars, looking at them. I say, Bruce, you can't look at the actors through binoculars. You're only 20 feet from them. He says, oh no, I want to see their eyes, because we never used video taps in those days, and he would, if we got one, he wouldn't record it, because he watches the actor. He stands next to the camera and watches the actor. He said, "Oh no, they love it when you look at them through the binoculars." He said, "They know you're paying attention." so he was very funny like that. But he's like, I spent my life sort of dodging green screen movies. I just didn't want to do films where there are crazy characters in the background, and I wanted films that were stories about people. And the great thing about Bruce is he does films where people are dealing with the cards they've been dealt, and they're films that really are a triumph of the human spirit, and that to me is worth telling. They're good values and good things to put on the screen. Hopefully AI doesn't sort of do that sort of stuff,
How has your way of working changed with the sort of new technology from when you began?
Well, I think it's a lot easier now. Like you don't have sleepless nights with the lab, and to make sure that everything got through the bath and there's something on the negative, and like shooting The Irishman with everything underexposed 2.5 to 3 stops was a nightmare, and on egg for film, which was a very sort of unstable film in a way. And it meant that the compositions had to be so carefully done that somebody would be semi-silhouetted, or otherwise you didn't have, you had to have a doorway or a window in shot. Otherwise the thing was just underexposed. So every composition had to have that in it. It's like doing night scenes where you've got to have fires in the background. They've got to be in every shot. They can't just be in one or two shots. They have to be in every shot, even the close-ups. Everything has to, like, you get the fire on a tin tray or something so you can move it into the frame in the background and to create the night mood. What you see is what you get in the digital world. And my first digital film was Yogi Bear in 3D, which was just about killed me. But that was
in 3D.
3D is an absolute
I was going to say, it doesn't sound like you.
No,
it's
it's a nightmare.
What a challenge that was. But that was we went whitewater rafting with a crane in a jet boat. Like it was crazy stuff. But we got it. It's really an incredibly difficult film to make. But I really, like, the last couple of films have been very pleasant in using the digital process. I do miss the canvas sometimes. Like, some period films would probably be better shot on film, but generally normal films are fine with it. But you've still got to work hard to get the look and to get the textures and things that you need to tell the story.
How did you approach the Newton Boys? That was a really interesting, because it's period, but it doesn't have that automatic feeling of period. You actually feel like you're there because of the way that it looks.
Again, it's really authentic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really authentic for the time. And you've got a mix of like a Western with people riding horses and motor cars, which is, I think, a lovely sort of counterpoint on a film.
Yeah.
It was a lovely crossover period from horse like the Western set that we had, and then the later bank robberies in a modern city, and the dialogue in the script. I said to Rick Linklater, I said, Rick, the dialogue's contemporary. Are you happy with that? He said, oh yes, I am. That's okay. That's what I want. I want it to be contemporary. But I said, well, what about the images? Do you want the images to look period? He said, yeah, that they should look period. So the production designer was a little crazy, and we had a set which had all white gloss woodwork. And I said, this to me doesn't ring true. It's not the right feeling for this whole thing. I said, is there any way we can get that back to wood grain? She was being very difficult about it. And I said, well, why don't we ask the locations people to ask them to see if we strip it off? Like, she didn't have a budget to do it. That could be their location fee to restore it back to wood grain. Anyway, people agreed to it, and we did it, and it looked so much better because all you would have looked at was these bloody white doors and white architraves and things, which would have just upstaged everything. And there were several people coming in and out this door. It would have been a film about a white door, which wouldn't have been good. And of course, we had that big train and a big night scene and bank robbers and Moscow light and all that sort of stuff. It's quite a big deal to like trains like that at night time are very tricky prop to work with. But it was Rick's great guy to work with. He's very, and his other films that he's done subsequently are just I think are all spectacular. The Sunrise series and all those films, they're very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting cinema. Yeah.
I read somewhere, is this right, that you've been operating on TV series?
No, not me.
Yeah, you should look on IMDb because it's got you down as operating on these two TV series.
Oh no, that's not me.
I'm serious. Yeah, Power Rangers, and I'm thinking.
Oh yeah,
that's
a misprint. Yeah, I haven't corrected that. I should do that. No, that's.
Oh right.
Well, the interesting thing earlier in my career, I was doing short films, and this is back in the 70s, and then I operated for Brian Probin, who is an English DP.
Oh yeah,
he did Poor Cow, Downhill Racer, and Badlands, and like the lovely films, real cult films. And he taught me everything I know about color. I've not learned anything more about colour. Well, maybe a little tiny bit, but he was fantastic with colour, and I used that techniques ever since, really. And he'd say, if talking to a director, what don't you like about the shot? Is it too wide, or is it too loose? Is it too high or too low? Or he'd have these sort of list of questions he'd ask the director as to narrow them, because they couldn't articulate what they didn't like about the shot, you know.
Exactly.
And he would give them this little quiz and find out what they liked and didn't like, which I think is a very handy thing to. It's very simple, but it's it helps them think about what the shot's about. And he went on to teach at the Australian Film School, which he was very good at. So I certainly learned a lot from Brian. He was really, really lovely. I then went on to operate on many films because I had such an early success that I just didn't have enough experience at operating. And then, of course, Johnny Seal being my operator on two of the early films I was spoiled rotten, and I had to shape up my act a bit so I could know what it's about.
Well, good.
Well, I think this has been great, Peter.
This has been great. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Have we missed anything you wished we'd talked about?
Well, I did a film, MAO'S Last Dancer, in China.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
MAO'S Last Dancer was a very unusual film to work on because we went to China and we didn't have permission to go to shoot there.
Really?
What?
Wow.
And it was just before the Olympics, and I think the BBC had been thrown out over something or other, and we met with the minister and everything, and I thought, oh God, we're not going to get permission for this thing. And the film takes place over a little boy is selected from his school and is taken to Beijing to be in the ballet, and he goes through the whole ballet classes, leaves his village, goes to the ballet classes, and living there. And then he becomes a teenage boy and does the dances again. Then he becomes an older boy. So we had these wonderful transition shots that Bruce devised, which, as you know, good transitions are always a sign of a good director, in my opinion. And the transitions were beautifully done. And for the early Chinese stuff, I wanted the film to look like an old Ektachrome film. So I was shooting on half-size frame, like on 800 ASA film, and underexposing a stop. So when it was blowing up, we did a framing leader, so like a 25 mil with a 50 mil in field of view.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the grain was quite enlarged, which is great. And then when the boy leaves and goes to Houston to be a ballet dancer at the Houston Ballet, I went back to standard 35 mil film and lower ASA or normal film stock use for the rest of it. And then in the timing we changed the colours of the early stuff, made the highlights slightly pink magenta and the shadows cyan green, and it looks absolutely beautiful. The early scenes with the little boys in the schoolhouse are just painterly. They're really, really very beautiful, and I love doing that sort of stuff, mucking around with the colour. And we shot that in 185 because ballet films in 240 are no good at all because you must see their feet. And you've got to have room for them to lift the dancer up in the air and things like that. So anamorphic's not a good format for dancing. But
so it sounds like for that you really like the digital process, the DI finish.
Oh, the DI finish was crucial for the look of that film. Yeah, yeah. I couldn't have got that any other way. I couldn't have done that in conventional film finish. No. And there on one of the scenes, I did a Giselle, which the old ballet company was doing before Madame Mao comes to look at it. And I lit that with primary and complementary light to make white light. So there wasn't any white light on the set at all, except for the spotlight, which had a little bit of half blue on it for a spotlight. So it was like an old-fashioned play, where they used different coloured lights in the theatre to to make white light. And I've done that. I did that first of all on a Campbell soup commercial with a whole lot of cooks, where I had a 20 by scrim on one side, and behind it I had 5Ks and 2Ks. The 5Ks had a full blue, and the 2Ks had a full 85 on, all the way down. So when one cook shadowed another cook, the shadows went blue or they went orange. But the effect was 3200 when they were in white outfits when they got all the light. But when they got shadowed, I noticed that painters do that. They put blue in the shadows and things like that. So I got it from a painting reference, and I thought I could do this in moving pictures, which would be a lot of fun. So I've done that a couple of times on films where I've changed the color temperature to paint with light, and it works very well. And then when Madame Mao sees the new revolutionary dance, we had a very stark stage with a tree and very lavender light coming down from above, and the corps de ballets in grey military short uniforms. All the ballet dancers had guns and they were all dancing. All the girls were dancing, and the bad guy gets up on the wall and shoots the hero boy, and then another guy jumps up on the wall, and the background was red in the sky. So it was very much of the patriotic sort of thing. Then when the boy gets up on the sky, did a crossfade to blue, and the red flag of China gets waved in the background. And of course, Madame Mao went wild and thought this was fantastic. So it was very much to enhance the patriotism of the Chinese people. So that was all done with coloured light. It was very different to Giselle, which was this pastel sort of mix of, like an impressionist painting. But it's fun. It's fun doing that sort of stuff. We really do have the best job in the world, I must say. Like it's, I don't tell producers this, but I would go out and do it for nothing. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. It's so creative. It's just, I know you, Roger, love what you do, and the people are fantastic that you work with, and I just love the crews. They're the people I miss the most, are the crews.
Yeah. That's the people I miss. That's what I miss the most, actually, when I'm not working, is that camaraderie and that collaboration with other people. Yeah,
without a doubt, that's it, isn't it? Really, it's what holds it all together. Really.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you, Peter.
Well, my pleasure.
This has been great.
Good.
I've learned something. I'll remember that trick you just talked about crossing lights. I actually never done that.
Oh, it's great fun to do. I must say, it's really it really is good. Yeah, it's you can't do it all the time, but it's usually in a semi-theatrical setting.
Oh, right.
But you could certainly do it in like science fiction and things like that. That would you get away with a lot more in those areas. Yeah. I don't know where this. I'm involved in Imago at the moment, and I'm also on the AI committee for the ACS, and it's probably going to go a bit down like the horror, sci-fi, MTV, cheap commercial route. Maybe next year, I think there might be a fair bit of that happening. But hopefully, it won't sort of get into the real storytelling of individual people and human stories. And documentaries will always have to be documentaries, I think. So AI is degenerative, and it tends to fall apart as it works on itself. So that's not good. Scary watching that making of 1899. Did you see that video of that? It's 1899 is a TV show shot in Scandinavia, and it's all on the volume. It's shot during COVID. And there's a documentary. There's a documentary you can get, the making of 1899. I think everybody should look at that. It's really quite extraordinary. And they tell you everything about it. It's a very well-made documentary, how the set design works in with the volume, and how they took the extras and then photographed them with this array of 360 cameras and turn them sideways and change their wardrobe, and then they appear in the background animated, So it's quite extraordinary. So it does bring you up to speed on.
Yeah.
We'll definitely look at that.
Well, there's a lot happening because there was a film that was going to open here in London that was just cancelled because it was written by AI.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So the film was totally written by AI, and I don't know how much the visuals or anything were done by AI, but there was like a bit of a fuss about it, and the cinema cancelled its screening.
Oh, that's extraordinary.
We'll see.
Yeah. Well,
we'll see.
It's basically theft, so it's a very tricky area for copyright and areas like that. I mean, talking to the Writers Guild in Australia, and there's a program that you can just put a novel into the AI, and it will come out with a film script. So this producers love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
They do,
I think that's the least of things that they're going to be using it for anyway.
Really tricky. Oh, it's good.
All right. Very good.
On that note.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.